And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO at Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today should be interesting. My guest is Phil Simon, and he's hard to put in or label. So amongst the things that he does, he is a writer, he is a ghostwriter, he's a speaker, he's a podcaster. But what I thought would be interesting today, given sort of where he sits, is really talk about a couple things. Number one, what he does, his platform, and then how he also helps others develop their nonfiction books and platforms and such to take out in the marketplace. Because it's, at least in my experience, fairly rare that someone's on both sides there. So welcome aboard, Phil.
Hey, Peter, thanks a lot for having me. And yeah, that's a fancy way of saying that I'm either unable to focus or, to use a 50-cent word, peripatetic.
Ooh, that's a Googleable word.
It is a Googleable word.
Cool. And for those of you under a certain age, there used to be things called the dictionary that we would go to and look those things up, but I don't even know where those are anymore. So give us a little bit of the Phil story, because you and I were chatting the other day, and it was, to me, it was really interesting in terms of your path, your career, how you got here, because nobody wakes up and says, okay, here's the plan, and then bang, here we are.
No, when I was a college professor teaching in the business school Department of Information Systems up until about 4 years ago, I joked that no one had a worse pedigree in the department than I, because I've got a master's in industrial and labor relations. I used to work in HR. I realized that I was horribly suited for that. My boss doesn't like me. Why didn't I get the promotion? It was so what they used to call left-brained, but I was pretty good at technology, data, systems. I went to Carnegie Mellon, so there even the poets know how to code.
Huh.
So I decided to, in 2008, to start writing. It became my first book. I liked it. I thought it didn't completely suck at it. Good things happened. So I've written a few books and then decided to start a hybrid publishing company. And that put out 6 books, 2 of which were my own. And then I started another one when I left Arizona State University in 2020. And we've done 4 books, one of which I ghostwrote, 3 of which I wrote. I'm ghostwriting a book now. So yeah, I sit on both sides of the aisle. And as a ghostwriter / book coach, I want to help people avoid some of the mistakes that I've seen others make and that I've made over my career. So that's me in a pretty big box.
Well, let's talk about the ghostwriting relationship experience, right? Because I've been around that world for a long time. And one of the things that just, unlike in almost any other profession, that's really strange is, if on paper, I was looking to hire an engineer, a coder, a CFO, or whatever, you look at their pedigree, you look at their history, where have they done, do an interview, go, okay, cool, they've got the chops, let's rock and roll. What I've seen in the ghostwriting world is pedigree matters, ish, but it's that intangible,
Yeah.
I sit down with you and you remind me of my 7th grade history teacher and I don't like you and I don't know why. So therefore the relationship shot, or there's an irrational reason for that type of a relationship, what is fairly intense and fairly intimate, to work or not to work. That's beyond control to some degree. So can you touch on that, or am I nuts? Am I on point?
No, it reminds me a lot of my days as a software consultant in the aughts. And there were times in which I sat down first day and I immediately clicked with a client, right? They said, you're a straight shooter. You cut through the bullshit. You tell us what we need to do without the jargon. And it worked out well. And then there are other times in which I would bring the same person I thought, and it was within 2 weeks, get this guy out of here. Right? He's exactly the wrong person. So my approach to ghostwriting is very similar. My goal is not to irritate you. Hopefully we can be friends, but you're hiring me to do a job. And I've said this dozens of times in the ghostwriting work that I've done. I'd much rather have you be angry at me before, when we can fix stuff, than after, when we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So what tips would you give someone that is in the market for a ghostwriter? And let me just sort of expand on that question. So there's 2 pieces of that. One is, how do you find fit? There is a kind of a dating piece to it. And then the other is, I think there's also confusion in the marketplace. Maybe this is 2 questions around, well, what does a ghostwriter do? Right? From someone that I could leave voicemails to when they create a book, to someone that I spar with, talk to both of those maybe. How do you get the relationship to work? And then what are the expectations around
Well, hopefully at a high level, Peter, your client likes your writing, because I know that you can try to put yourself in the voice of another person, but I just would argue that for nonfiction, I don't want to speak about memoirs or about
Yeah.
fiction. There are certain rules, as you know, that you'd want to follow, irrespective of the title of the book. So if you use a lot of passive voice and jargon, long, confusing sentences, you're not going to resonate with readers. And then if the book doesn't do well, then is it the ghostwriter's fault? And you don't want to have that constant back and forth. So in the most recent book that I completed, my client hired me specifically because she loved my book, Reimagining Collaboration.
Mhm.
She said, I'd love to do that along the lines of our topic. So there's that. With Racket Publishing, my little hybrid outfit, I certainly can produce a manuscript, and then you can take that to Greenleaf or Amplify or Page Two or one of the other large micro publishers. But I actually employ a team, much like they do. So if you want to work with me the entire time, then yeah, I know a very talented couple of designers and a
Sure.
few editors and indexers and ebook conversion folks. So we can scale up and scale down as needed. And then I can also manage the project, because if you're trying to work backwards from a particular date, then the manuscript is an important part of it, but it's hardly the only part. Plus, there's the
Yeah.
marketing aspect as well.
That's
So to me, starting these hybrid publishing companies isn't that much of a stretch, because I've done a lot of these things either independently or with traditional publishers, and I could tell you the pros and cons of each. I was recently speaking with someone on LinkedIn who had signed up with a traditional publisher, but this had an interesting wrinkle in the contract. So the royalty rates were pretty standard, but there was a 3,000 book minimum in the first year. And when I was speaking with this person, I said,
meaning, just to clarify, meaning the author had to buy it. Yeah,
right,
so
so
I've seen that. I call that the worst of both worlds clause, where
oh,
you know,
100%, because
you're taking all the financial risk, right?
right,
And then on the royalty side, it's the crappy royalty of a traditional.
right. Now, if you're an acquisitions editor at insert name of big publisher and you're dealing with a first-time author, why wouldn't you do that, right? Because it's basically heads
Right.
they win, tails you lose. And
Right.
then if the book doesn't sell beyond the 3,000, then you have to write a check. And even if it's discounted 50%, they're still going to make their money.
Yeah.
I'm explaining to this person that there are alternatives, which again, 15 years ago, I didn't know nearly as much about. So I would have probably fallen for that. And you see this sometimes with Forbes books, right? They're going to charge you $100,000 because they can put Forbes books on the cover, when in fact you can work with reputable folks who charge a lot less. And yeah, you've got that brand, but I'll just ask you point blank, have you ever been to a bookstore and said Forbes books, oh, I don't know the author or the title, but I have to buy the next? It's not a car, right? Some people are very
Right.
brand loyal, but I won't just pick on Forbes book. I've never walked into a bookstore and said, oh, I have to have whatever's next from Penguin, right?
Well, but I would say the same thing, in that how are books read today? It's largely on an electronic device. I think I'm one of the only dorks left that when I open the Kindle to the book, I skim back to all the filler pages because I'm curious who the publisher is, versus 99.9% of the world just wants to get to, they were the best of times, they were the worst of times. Why would they care about that? I'm curious, right? So it's not like, oh, that's a Wiley author versus a Forbes author versus a Page Two author, therefore they represent X in the marketplace to me.
Yeah, it seems like many authors maybe get lured in at first to a standard book deal, but once they realize that, again, by and large, and we saw this a couple of weeks ago with that Publishers Weekly article detailing when the Department of Justice subpoenaed, I think it was execs from Penguin and Random House, just how few books earned out and how little authors actually could expect to receive in terms of marketing support from their folks there.
Yeah.
Not surprising to me that many of them kind of scurry over to the other side, and they realize, to your point from before, Peter, if I'm going to take all the risk, I might as well get a lot more of the reward.
Yeah. If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave a 5-star review at ratethispodcast.com/LTL and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcasts and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com podcast. I want to flip now to the other side, because this is where I think you're really in a unique place. So, we've talked about ghostwriting, you serving your clients as a ghostwriter, but now, let's talk about Phil World. You've got your own platform, you've got your own thought leadership, you've got your own IP. Tell me a little bit about where that came from and what you've done with it and what you're going to continue to do with it.
I love the fact that if I write something now under the Racket imprint or what was before the Motion imprint, it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it. If I want to work with a company like DropCap to try to arrange for international translations of the book, I can do that. If I don't like the terms, I can say no. When I'm working with a traditional publisher, depending on the deal, I might just get a cursory FYI email, or in the case with...
But those are business issues. Where I was going is give me a sense of the essence of your thought leadership on collaboration.
Right. Yeah, I was getting there, but in a circuitous way. So, for example, with Reimagining Collaboration, which was a book number 11, I didn't have to sweat if I wanted to record a teachable course or work with some other company, and I was violating the terms of my contract. If I wanted to do, and I've never really done a proper sequel to a book, but if I wanted to do Reimagining Collaboration again, I would not have the competing works clause, right, that you'd have to deal with. So I love the fact that I've got the freedom to do really whatever I want with my IP. Whereas when I've worked with traditional publishers, if I did want to put out some of my content for free, yes, they'd say, sure, put out a sample, an excerpt of a chapter or something like that, but I'd have to worry about violating that. But no, I have no qualms about turning my content into workshops, into online courses, even doing things like creating a bespoke version of one of my books. So my previous book, Low Code, No Code, No Code, Low Code, the citizen developers and the surprising future of business applications, I reference a lot of software vendors there. If the VP of marketing or the CMO of company X said, we'd love a own version of this with our CXO writing a forward and then slap our company logo on the front, again, that's something that I can do without having to clear it with either my agent or the acquisitions editor, my publisher. And I feel like it's a lot cleaner. So this whole notion of agency theory, I'm a big believer that if traditional publishers, and I think we've seen this with a few of them trying to get into speaking as well, but if I do a speaking gig for X number of dollars and I have books there that they bought in advance, the publisher typically isn't getting a cut of that speaking fee like a speaker bureau would. So if you remove those folks, then I feel like it's a lot cleaner. You don't have to ask for as much permission. It's a lot riskier. You have to wear a few different hats.
Yeah.
You also don't have to ask permission to get.
So let's stay with that for a second and sort of or expand on that from the standpoint of business models, right? So you've got an idea, you've got ideas, you put it in a book, whatever, rainbows and unicorns, the book becomes a success, right? For various reasons. What are the underlying business models that you're seeing today? So obviously speaking's a pretty standard model. Everybody wants to be a speaker, right? That's what you do. But how are you, as an example, either firsthand or seeing with your clients that you ghostwrite for, innovatively monetizing their thought leadership?
I mean, you hit on some of the standard ones. The notion of a bespoke version of a book is really interesting. I feel like I'm certainly not the only person to have thought of it, but when I worked with some clients, I said, look, this is another thing that you can do for a relatively small amount of money with significant upside, certainly as a supplement to speaking. So let's say that you want to speak at a conference and you'd like to get 5 figures. Well, they're only offering an honorarium. Well, what if they either A, bought a certain number of books, which you can discount because you've done it yourself. So if it's a $25 paperback, you could have it printed, shipped for $7 or $8, depending on a bunch of factors. But then if you charge them 12 or 13, they're getting it at a 50% discount, but you're still making money. And whether you get $12,000 for speaking or $12,000 from book sales, that money still spends. I also found that on a personal level, and again, I'm sure I'm not the only person to do this, but I wrote 14 books. I basically know where the bodies are buried, and I launched a software product about 5-6 weeks ago called Racket Hub. It's based on Notion. It's a very comprehensive book management system that I can either use with my clients, and it is kind of a lot at first, but there is a method to the madness, or just in terms of a business model, I've actually had some conversations with some ghostwriters and some smaller publishers about basically licensing this. I will compare myself, Peter, on a much, much smaller scale to something like Amazon Web Services. So once
Yeah.
Amazon circa 2005, 2006 figured out how to create all this compute power, all these APIs and powerful services for their e-commerce business, they could let all that vanish into the ether, or wait for it, they could sell it. In which case they say that AWS generates 80 to 90% of Amazon's profits, despite being smaller than the commerce or retail side of the business. So because I learned how to do books so well, I can charge what I think is a pretty fair rate.
But that's unique to you, because on the publishing side, what I'm saying is put on your other hat, Phil, the thought leader. How, let's say I fell in love with reimagining collaboration.
How
And I
could you
reach
not?
out, of course, how would I not, right? And I reach out to you, and I'm an SVP in a financial services company, and said, wow, that was awesome. And we need to do that here. And it's costing us money because we're not growing, or we're not getting the best stuff to market as a result of the lack of collaboration internally. How can you help me, Phil? And the answer isn't just buy a bunch of my books, right? Like,
No, absolutely not. I mean, I just submitted a quote to a company a couple of weeks ago to do some custom training, maybe a
yeah,
webinar, consulting. And if you already offer those services, but you've written a well-received book, then think about it this way, Peter. And again, it's nothing I'm sure you haven't discussed with your own clients. Person A, smart cookie, decent website, some nice videos. Person B has all that stuff and a book.
right.
Which person do you think, in theory, has got that credential? And not to mention things like passive income. I'm ceaselessly amazed at the randomness of the queries I will get sometimes over LinkedIn or my website, and sometimes they're not even in the same country. I was a couple of days ago, I finally received the international one of the translations, Korean, from my book, No Code, Low Code. So I've spoken in South Korea on
Right.
the age of the platform back in 2012. So I guess that you have to be, as an author, willing to embrace the chaos of it, because I find that success tends not to be linear. It would be great if you followed some sort of playbook, right?
Sure.
Build up my website, my author platform. I'm going to get a lot of followers, build a big Substack, turn that into a book parlays into speaking leads to da, 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 da. I just, on a personal level, haven't gone through that route. And it's one of the reasons I actually took the job as a college professor. I wanted to get more stability with the income. So I say there are things that you can do to increase your batting average. But if you're
I think there's a couple of variables there. So one is luck is a variable, and nobody likes to talk about that.
100%.
It's all about, it's in my control. So luck is a variable. And the other place is, I think a lot of thought leaders and authors are really lousy listeners when it comes to what the market is telling you, right? So for example,
What did you say? I'm kidding. Tough crowd.
Folks, and
Try the veal.
tip your servers. So what I mean by that is, okay, so why, did somebody want the rights in South Korea, right? So to me, that would be worth exploring. There have been times where books that do okay here in the States or North America, whatever, all of a sudden they take off like crazy in Poland or something. Like there's some unpredictable thing that wouldn't have been on your radar to say, okay, and step 5 is I'm going to be a rock star in Poland. But if you don't have the mechanisms in place to listen to the market and the signals, you miss them. Maybe it's, I don't know the South Korea piece, but there's a reason why somebody wanted.
Yeah, and I wish I could tell you what it is. I remember when I was writing Slack for Dummies, I thought there might be a Japanese translation, because Slack, for whatever reason, is huge in Japan. There's a great book that came out maybe 6 to 8 months ago called Fluke by Brian Klaas, Klaas. And I remember reading it. The basic premise was that everything is connected. We love to, and I've read other books like this, like Everything is Obvious in Hindsight by Duncan Watts, I think it was, of Microsoft.
Yeah.
But we really want this formula. I mean, I used to write for Inc.com. I guarantee any listener, go to Inc.com right now. The top 10 articles on their website, of them, probably 7 have a number. They're listicles, right? And we get that. We want that. We want the shortcut. It's natural. But in reality, there isn't one. So I can't tell you. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves. I have this disclaimer in basically all my books. You can follow all of my advice and fail, and you could ignore it all and be wildly successful. But kind of like if you and I are playing poker, and you constantly play deuce 7 and I only play a pair of kings, you'll beat me sometimes. But if that's your strategy to play bad hands, And my strategy is to play premium hands. Over the long term, I will eat your lunch.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been great. Appreciate the insight. Appreciate you sharing your story with us, Phil. And thanks for coming on board today.
Peter, I enjoyed it.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.